Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast, connecting the opaque world of food startups.
This is Daniel Imri Sitanayake of Tiny Farms, and you are listening to the Food Startups Podcast.
Welcome to the first interview of 2016. And you guys are in for a treat today. I got to spend my morning watching what you could call a media production company. It's 1 Degree Organics, and they sell veganic ingredients, breads, seeds, cereals from all over the world, especially in North America, but they're also in Paraguay, Argentina, Mexico, Indonesia. And the really interesting thing about their company, besides the veganic movement, which we'll talk about in the show, is they do full-on high-quality videos that interview and you get to know the farmer and the process where the ingredients are made. We're talking about cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, millet, spelt, all sorts of stuff. So his philosophy is really cool because they just kind of showed up, to put it in those types of words. They just showed up to Expo West in 2012 with a unique type of software they had for ingredient traceability, no customers in Anaheim, California. And today in 2016, they're nationwide in Whole Foods and they're just crushing it. I'm not just talking about sales, but they're living out their philosophy. They're making videos, they're having fun, they're traveling the world and selling the products and the lifestyle, I should say, that they believe in. So I'm going to bring in our guest now. His business card says Vice President for Marketing and Sales, but you'll find Danny Houghton playing many roles at 1 Degree Organic Foods. A founding partner, he works directly with President Stan Smith to develop strategy. A key player in supply and procurement, he leads ingredient expeditions around the world in search of pure veganic harvests. And listeners will define the word veganic as we start the show, and I'll let Danny do that. But this company, he's the head of the media team, meaning that, the flowers, the seeds, the cereals that they sell, you can scan the QR code and know exactly where the ingredients are coming from and also get to know the farmers. Not just, like a lot of times with coffee, it comes from this plantation, but you see, interactive videos where you can meet the farmers online. So, Danny, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Okay, so as you mentioned, you were raised vegetarian, and you developed a term that a lot of people are still not aware of, and I imagine it's one of the main parts of education for your company to, buyers and consumers. So please define veganic.
Happy to do that. I'm often asked, did you create the term veganic? And unfortunately, I did not. But people often think, well, it just means it's vegan and organic, right? And there is a kernel of truth to that, but it's a little bit more involved. Vegan refers to a specific type of diet that you subscribe to that excludes all animal products. Veganic actually refers to a type of cultivation or a way that you grow food, and taking out any type of animal-based fertilizer, blood meal, bone meal, anything that is animal-based in the cultivation of your crops. And people say, well, how do you fix nitrogen or various other nutrients in the soil? And veganic actually subscribes to a kind of a time-honored method of doing things like crop rotation, where you'll grow a different crop from year to year, where you will fix nutrients in the soil for the next year's crop that is going to be different, avoids that monocropping challenge that we so often have outside of organic farming and even inorganic farming sometimes. And then also cover crops, where we plant a crop knowing that we're going to disc it into the soil and that it's going to build the nutrients in that soil, that respects the local ecosystem, lowers our carbon footprint. And this process really is aimed at eliminating outside contaminants in the soil. Your plant is only as good as the soil that it grows in. And so we want to avoid any type of pathogen, heavy metal, hormone, antibiotic that may come from those animal byproducts and potentially contaminate, or in many cases do contaminate, the soil. So that is a working definition anyways of the term veganic.
Great. And so, I read about you guys in the sense that there may be a veganic certification, or it seems like you guys would be interested in starting that or being part of that. But you mentioned that, I don't know if this was you, but someone for your company mentioned in an interview that you could see some pushback from, we'll call it the traditional organic, non-GMO certifiers and companies.
It's been interesting to see how people have responded to this concept. There are certain entities that do certify in certain ways, and anything that may be new or different sometimes can rock the boat. But we've also sensed an openness on a number of fronts to say, well, should we be asking these questions? Is there a better way to do this? And so it's like anything else, it's something that's new. When people, when I ask the question, I say, are you concerned about soil health at all? And people say, well, of course. A plant is just as efficient at pulling up contaminants as it is nutrients. And so people care more and more about that type of thing. And as you ask the questions and encourage people to think in a sustainable way, where we're really looking out for the health of the planet, and we're wanting to make sure that we, have soil that's going to be there for our grandkids and our great-grandkids that will allow them to be nurtured and have a good food supply as well, people think, we should probably examine this a bit more. So I don't know that I would say that it has any more kickback than any other type of new idea when you put it out there. And we certainly have those battles, but I also think that there is an openness to say we should be asking these questions and making sure that we take whatever steps are necessary to have a safe and healthy set of organic products that can be grown and consumed.
So that's interesting, and I really like this kind of way of teaching in the sense that, veganic, you guys ask the right questions, right? So instead of telling people, you should farm in this type of way, et cetera, you're kind of asking them questions, and by their own answers, they're thinking about it and kind of coming to this conclusion on their own, which I think is brilliant. Now, from an article that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it seems like, 2012, Expo West, the way it makes it out is like you kind of showed up with not a much less developed company than you have today. What exactly did you have, in terms of the business model when you got to Expo West in 2012?
One of the things that is a lot of fun is taking an idea and translating into something that's tangible. And that line was crossed for the first time at Expo West in Anaheim, California in 2012. And, as I had shared a little bit earlier, we went through a very involved process to build a software platform that would allow this traceability on our products. And, we were scrambling. We had to get our packaging in place, had to make sure that the software worked. There's a whole debugging process we had to go through. We had to spend 6 months documenting our first core set of farmers and going through the film production process and loading all of that into our software platform, making sure it worked. And we didn't have any distribution. We didn't have a single client. We'd never written an order. All we had was a booth at Expo West. And within 15 minutes, one of the staff that puts on the show, who are looking for kind of best in show, they have an award process they go through called the Nexty Order, what's coming next in food. And within the first hour and a half, I had shown pretty much everyone that managed the show how our QR code worked, and the fact that we had a full transparency in every ingredient for the customer. And it sent some ripples through the industry. And we found out by the end of the show that we were entered as one of 51 semifinalists for the food and beverage category for their Nexty Award. It's a very coveted award and one that is highly visible in the industry. And so 8 weeks later, having gone through that entire process, we were awarded their food and beverage category Nexty Award, which was a huge win for a little company out of Canada that really was just getting started. And so it started conversations. It gave us exposure in ways that we probably would have taken years to do otherwise. And it really goes back to that unique selling proposition. The reason the name of our company is 1 Degree Organic Foods is that there's only 1 degree of separation between the farmer that grows your food and you as the customer. And that was a real, formational event in our company that kicked us off, had a lot of people become acquainted with who we were and what our values were, and as a result have allowed us to grow to the company that we are today.
That's so cool. I think a lot of people, I've had a lot of people that have emailed me from the show that have gone to, recently Expo East and Fancy Food Show, and that's kind of like the dream. You show up to that first trade show and it sparks, that's what happened with Bob Redmill going to Expo West, years and years back, but it sparks the growth of the company. Now, you mentioned something, so you said 6 months producing the first video, the first film of your first ingredient. What was the first ingredient that you guys sold?
So the first set of films, I should clarify, there were actually 14 or 15 farmers that we went out and visited and did a full media workup on over that first 6 months. But the first The first ingredient we actually did was an unrefined salt that comes out of Utah. My good friend Daryl Bouchard, it's a family company called Real Salt. Actually, I think it's called Redmond Trading Products, but that specific sub-company is Real Salt. And it's a company that is family-owned 3 generations ago. They were looking for a way to kind of add some additional income and noticed that there was a lot of salt on their property. Started a salt mine, and what we loved about this salt is the fact that it's unrefined. You know, a lot of people don't understand the salt that they consume is highly refined. A lot of the trace minerals that come with it that are a real critical catalyst in allowing your body to properly handle the salt that you're eating are stripped away and removed because they are valuable. And, when we go down to the micro level and we're talking about an individual ingredient, we want to choose the best ingredient that we can. And Real Salt was that specific ingredient for salt. And we use it in our breads, we use it in our cereals. Anything that we bake, you have to have salt. And so we went in, we actually walked into their mine. They showed us everything, from A to Z on how they mine it, why that salt is preferable. And, we created a video that documented that and allowed our consumers to understand why this was a preferable salt. And it was a wonderful shoot. It was the kind of the first blush of executing our media plan. We went on from there to document a number of grain farmers in Canada, the United States. We documented a grape growing outfit in Fresno. We use grapes as a natural sweetener in our breads rather than using a sugar. So there was a real nice mixture of different organic farmers that we were able to visit with, get acquainted with, and document to be able to share with our customers with that first set of products at Expo West.
That's awesome. And listeners, you can find this podcast at foodstartupspodcast.com/1degree, with 1 being spelled out, ONEDEGREE. Now, Danny, I want to mention, I don't know if you've read this book, but if you haven't, you have to read Salt, A World History, because it's really, really fascinating stuff. And I don't know, have you read that book?
I have, actually. It's a great book.
Oh man, yeah, that it blew my mind. It was like with Gandhi and I guess Utah, right, Salt Lake City. But yeah, fantastic book as a side note, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But okay, great. So moving on. So you guys are a technology and media business as much as you are a food company. And listeners, I'm going to link to I'll say my 4 or 5 favorite videos. I'll probably add that salt video, which I haven't seen yet, to the show notes. But these videos are like well produced and they educate you. Like the one I saw about I start off with Indonesia because tropical really enticed me, and the ones in Indonesia, I guess, like cinnamon, how cinnamon's made, vanilla, nutmeg, and then the outer, I think, mace. So anyway, I want to talk about your world expeditions. I mean, can you tell me about, let's just say, in the last 12 months, what have been some of your, what are they like? I mean, do you travel with a whole production crew? How many people go on these expeditions from your company?
We usually have 3 to 4 people on these expeditions, and it varies depending on whether we are doing something that's domestic here in North America, either in Canada or the United States, or whether we're needing translation and are headed overseas to some other destination. But it's very simple. It's very low key. There's usually myself, my wife Sandra, who is our photographer, and then we have a producer that does nothing but make videos for us full time. And we'll go in. We'll spend a day, sometimes 2 days, depending on the nature of the shoot. And we'll just sit down with a farmer and have them explain to us what they do, why they grow organically. So many people don't understand the amount of work that goes into an organic cultivation process. It's much more involved than a more conventional type of approach. And so we allow them to kind of codify that value add for the customer. And it's a tremendous learning experience. And I'll mention one specifically. You mentioned cinnamon in Indonesia. That was really a fun expedition. We're out where we can't necessarily understand and speak to people. Some people speak English, but we're on the island of Java in Indonesia. I believe it was Java or Sumatra. Sometimes I get them confused. We did so many spices there, but we're talking with our guide and translator, and she was telling us, well, it's about a mile hike to this location where we're going to. We're actually going to cut down the cinnamon tree. They very carefully cultivate them. They usually grow them and plant them. It takes about 20 years to grow, and then they'll cut them and they go ahead and take the bark off. And so, we're very close to the equator. We do have to carry all our gear, so all of us are geared up with these backpacks, 50, 60 pounds with tripods and cameras and lenses and all this stuff. And what they didn't tell us was that we were scaling a major mountain, and it was probably I don't know, 45, 50-degree pitch. And the trail, because of the way that they transport cinnamon down, was kind of a wet mud. And they would actually slide it. They had these little runners where they would slide bundles of this cinnamon down. But going up, it was a bit of a challenge to hike. And by the time our crew got to the spot where we were going to cut the tree, we were shot. It was, 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and the elevation. We just had to kind of sit for 20 or 30 minutes before we even started filming. And, we're on the steep side of a mountain, but the views were just tremendous. And as they began to cut the cinnamon tree down, all of a sudden you could smell this kind of, aroma in the air of cinnamon. And then you watch these highly skilled people that have done this for years. It's come down to them from their fathers and their grandfathers. And they have this thing, the bark peeled off of this tree almost immediately. And you can see the oil from the cinnamon, and then you see how it kind of naturally curls, when you see cinnamon sticks dried now. We know where that comes from, and we're able to share that with our customers. And then see how they bring it down and how they go about cleaning it. We learned, tricks of the trade, for example. People that are not necessarily selling a high-grade cinnamon, they'll take little twigs and leaves and things. They'll put it inside that curled cinnamon and try and get a higher weight so they can make more money, but usually that's equated with a sub-quality cinnamon. So just learning kind of the whole background and the craft of how that, that flavor that you're so used to tasting, where it comes from, and providing that context so it's not just a name and an ingredient deck, but it's actually an experience that our customers can kind of submerge themselves in and understand what that means.
I think, the way you spoke it through is exactly what went through my head, because I'm like, well, cinnamon, is it a tree? I had no idea. And it's great the way the process is broken down. And another video, which I also linked to, is in the vanilla, like the way they do the, I guess they pollinize,
yes.
And they use that little tool to open up, I guess, the bean or the flower. It's amazing. Really cool stuff. So, okay, so you got a team of 3 to 4, and you've been doing this for, over 3 years now. That's amazing. Now, what are some of your future plans for the company? Do you have more ingredients that you plan to add this year?
There are constant ingredients that we're looking to continue to add, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we are consistently looking for new ways to add different types of ingredients into the mix that will allow us to push our product development forward. But we've dealt a lot. For example, we've talked about a couple spices out of Indonesia. We do a lot of grains here in North America, not only the traditional organic wheats, but some of the more ancient varieties. Spelt is a big one that we really like to do. And, we don't have just a single farmer. In many cases we do to start, but we want to add additional farmers for a given ingredient. So at any time, if we have interest in creating higher volumes of products, we're able to do that with multiple farmers. Some of the more ancient varieties of grains, things like a Corazon wheat, which is a variety that was actually has its roots in the pyramids. It's an interesting story there. There was a guy post-World War II that was stationed in Egypt. He was a bomber pilot, I think. He was at one of our bases there, and on a side expedition got somehow into a pyramid tour and found an urn of grain. That a pharaoh or someone that had passed into the afterlife, they believed that they needed to put food there for them. And so he took this grain, he brought it back to Montana and started growing it. It's a very ancient variety, so you have things that are a simpler gluten structure. It's not heavily hybridized, so you're able to consume it and not maybe have some of the gastrointestinal discomfort that modern wheat many times will create for people today. So we're constantly looking for those types of premium, high-quality organic ingredients that are unique, that create a very high-end, healthy eating experience. So we're adding them daily.
That's awesome. And Danny, so we had Kamut, Bob, the founder of Kamut, on the show, which I guess is their brand of organic Corazon wheat. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there's a huge misconception with gluten and gluten-free. A lot of people say they're allergic to gluten, but I don't know. I don't know the exact number. I've seen studies on it, but I can't recall the exact number, but a very high percentage. It's more because of the modern versus ancient wheat problem, and they can eat Corazon wheat without a problem, or I guess spelt would be another type of ancient wheat, I think. So those, the gluten, I think there's people oversimplify gluten, which I understand. You're trying to be gluten-free, et cetera, but it's just not that simple.
No, it's not. And, the book Wheat Belly came out a couple of years ago, and there are some very interesting things in that book about ancient grain varieties and how modern hybridization has changed the nature of and the structure of the modern wheats that we eat today. And, you're able to see how taking a process of hybridization that would happen naturally in nature over a period of many years is now many times done in a case of days or weeks in the lab. And that has, consequences that we don't always understand. And the focus has always been on, getting a higher yield and a shorter plant to maximize crop yield. And the human being who is consuming the product is sometimes left out. And so there are consequences that happen for that. And so as we kind of look to deconstruct some of that and get back to a healthier food supply, ancient grains play a major role in that, and something that we at One Degree are a big fan of.
And it's interesting because in the video on, I think, millet farmers, I believe, in Canada, it was really interesting to me because the way they spoke about it, and I just never thought about that. I guess I always thought about my body because I prefer to eat organic whenever possible. Mm-hmm. But, they were talking about, listen, we don't want to be around these synthetic fertilizers, et cetera, we'll be out on the fields all day. And so kind of for their own, not just what they eat, but just being around it themselves. So that was really cool in one of the videos on millet. And Danny, I guess I want to ask you, so you don't have to know the answer to this, and I've had very smart people on both sides of the equation give me opposing answers, but I'd be curious to your opinion, and if you don't know, that's fine. Do you think it's possible to feed 7 billion people with, we'll say, either organic or sustainable veganic farming?
Well, I would not pretend to be a philosopher that would be able to solve that in a couple-minute answer on an interview like this. Here is what we're focused on trying to do at One Degree. Our job, as we see it, is to go out and source ingredients that are of the highest organic quality, that allow the people that trust us to supply them with their food will know is curated to give them the healthiest and the safest quality products that that are able to be found. And so I can't pretend to be smart enough to answer and say, if we grew everything completely organically, could we feed the whole world? There are pros and cons both ways to that. And what we choose to do at One Degree is to focus on what we can influence and change, and that is bringing a level of transparency and curation of ingredients at the highest level to people that care about their food, want to know where it comes from, and know that it is the healthiest of choices they can make. And that's really what One Degree is founded on.
Right on. And I appreciate that answer. It's really complex, right? And it could be different in different countries. Like, it's possible that a yield could be higher depending on it's probably very possible that the type of climate, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good answer. Okay, well, listen, finishing up. So I've seen this from my end, working with organic dried fruits, about kind of the organic loopholes. And I guess you guys seem to be pretty, I don't want to say advocates, but you guys write a lot about that because I think a lot of people will be surprised that there's a lot of organic foods that come into the U.S. that are either they find pesticides in it or there's a lot of things that they're not telling you. And for example, I know I have plenty of stories that I've heard just from working in it, but the USDA doesn't have time to test, everything being imported into the United States, and there's tons of tricks and stuff. And you guys seem to talk about that, which I think is really important because the end consumer deserves to know where the ingredients are coming from, and especially if they're buying organic, it should definitely be organic. So I think that's really cool, and that can be found on the OneDegreeOrganics.com blog. But Danny, if people want to learn more about the veganic movement, how would you recommend listeners to find out about it?
One of the things that is easiest thing to do is to simply type veganic into Google. Certainly our website has a wealth of knowledge at OneDegreeOrganics.com. I know you're going to be linking to that for your listeners. And we do the very best we can to share why veganic is important and what, be a contributor to that dialogue. We certainly are a leader as a brand in championing veganic, but also championing transparency. Veganic is an actual byproduct of the ability that we have to bring a level of transparency and not have a commoditized type of set of ingredients that we have in our products. And that's what's so unique about One Degree is that transparency comes into play. So certainly, the veganic is a critical thing that we are very much a champion of. But the idea of transparency and giving the people the ability to make an informed choice. When I look back at our history and the way that the food industry has commoditized our ingredients, they throw them all together, we don't know where they come from, and there's no more being held accountable because of that nature, the way that our food system works. And I think it was Ronald Reagan that famously said, trust but verify. And that's the principle that One Degree is built on. We want to provide people with information to make informed decisions about what they put in their bodies. And veganic is a natural byproduct of that process. But being able to have that information and bring a level of transparency to our industry is really one of our founding principles and one of the things that we espouse at One Degree.
Great. Well, Danny, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Love what you're doing. Seems like you guys are also having a lot of fun as well.
Absolutely. It is an absolute blast to meet these people, to function in this world of organic farming and organic food. It's a close-knit community. People really care about the environment, the quality of the food that they grow. We just find that they're good people. You had mentioned a lot of people that it started, you've noticed from our films, and there's definitely a pattern. As you look at the different organic farmers that we've documented, many of them decided to shift from a conventional farming model to an organic farming model because they did not want to expose their family, their children, their wife or husband to a conventional, set of pesticides and herbicides. And some of them even have stories where, they spilled some of it on them and had near-death experiences or almost died. And so you're able to see this family value ethic that is kind of a unifying theme throughout the organic farmers we've talked to. And I think that is matched with our customers on the other side with people that really care about their families and want to make sure that they are giving them optimized, healthy food that's going to give them a good quality of life. And to live in that ecosystem for us as a company is a very rewarding thing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's really universal, like you mentioned, because I saw that in Paraguay, Indonesia, and Canada, 3 different countries, and they're all coming to the exact same conclusion in 3 pretty distinct cultures. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say that it is a unifying theme regardless of where we travel, and it's a very rewarding thing to see.
Great. All right, Danny, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, Matt.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.